Welcome everybody. Now, before I get on to today's topic, I'm going to do a little bit of a callback to last week's topic. And in doing so, I'm just going to show you that I actually mowed right around this area. And I trimmed a little bit too, because what I'm going to show you is kind of low to the ground, so I needed a good view of it so you could see it. So anyway, just to show you just how dry it was and how little the grass and most of the property grew, I have a little demonstration. So here you can see where I mowed. I mowed up close to the house too, and around the deck, because those areas don't absorb water, so it kind of rolls off of them, it splashes off of them and such. So the grass around it gets a double dose, so it gets almost a normal amount of rain. So it actually had grown quite a bit. So we got rid of that. Can you hear a pheasant back there? Sounds like a chicken, kind of. They're around here. They're introduced, ring-tailed pheasants. They were brought in for hunting purposes, but they're around. They're pretty cool to watch. Hopefully I can get some video of them. They're pretty shy, though. They like to go away. Anytime you go out the door, they get freaked out. But the rooster of them is a pretty nice looking bird to look at. So anyway, but yeah, so there was, back to the topic at hand, there was about 12 weeks of decent growing weather for grass, in normal conditions, if there had been enough water, where it was sunny, and, for the most part, throughout the summer, from late June until about actually the day of the autumnal equinox. And during that 12 weeks, we got this much growth. This part has been mowed, this part has not. It's about 1 week's worth of growth, maybe a little bit more, less than 2 weeks worth of growth in a normal year. And that's all we got for that whole 12 weeks, for basically the whole summer. So yeah, that's just how it goes. Weird weather. Even last year it wasn't like that. So just a strange year of mostly dry weather. But there you have it. Now, on to the topic at hand for this week. So today I'm going to talk to you about how you get your water into your home and how it's different between the city and out here in a rural place like this. So in a city, you would have water as a utility. Generally it's run by the city. You could call it municipal water. Be a pretty decent name for it, I suppose, if you write a paper on it or something. But yeah, a municipal water system. They gather the water from the surrounding countryside and put it all together and pump it out to everybody's house and business. And it's just there. You have at every place, every house, every business, whatever, has a meter that it goes through, shows how many gallons you use per month, and you are charged based on your use. And, it just works. You don't have to think about it except for to pay that bill. You go in, you hit the tap on the sink, or the tap on the shower, or wherever else, flush the toilet, anything you do, and the water's just there. It's pretty convenient. I had no complaints with it when I lived there. And, so that's how they get it. But out here, in this rural area, there's just not that many people per square mile to make that reasonable, to lay those water mains to pump that water out to us. So instead, we have to sink a well. And I talked about wells as a potential consequence of a prolonged severe drought in this area. Something that we've never really seen, but if it were to happen for a long enough period of time and to be severe enough, it would drain out. Our continued use of the water in the aquifer down below through our wells would drain them dry, and our wells would run dry, and we'd have to get new wells drilled to at a deeper level to try and access water that might be down lower. And that would be pretty bad. But I realized when I was talking about that is one of the major differences between city and rural life. It's just the presence of wells in general. never think about wells in the city. I mean, I grew up in a city. I never thought about a well. The only information about a well that I had to inform me was movies and TV, and it was always old school wells that were, a big hole in the ground that was like 3 to 4 feet wide, had a little wall around it so that you knew it was there and you didn't just walk over it and fall in. Maybe a rigging over top with a crank and an axle, rope coming off of it with a bucket on it. You lowered it down, bucket hit the water and filled up, and you cranked it back up, and you had your bucket full of water to use for whatever you needed to use it for. And that was a well for most of human history, from the time that we first formed settlements to the Industrial Revolution. That was how you did a well. That was a dug well. It was that wide because you needed to have at least one person, maybe more than one, down there digging out all of the dirt and rocks between the surface of the ground and the aquifer down below that contains the water. Now, there are aquifers almost everywhere. They're not quite everywhere, but they're almost everywhere. I mean, there's aquifers under the Sahara Desert. One of the driest places on Earth. It's got water underneath the ground. And that alone must have been a sort of amazing discovery. Now, it probably came up independently in various places where people started settling down. And in some of those places, it was probably obvious because there were springs, places where the groundwater erupted up to the surface on its own. And so that probably led them to go, well, there's obviously water under there. We should dig down and get it because we can use that stuff. But in other places, it probably came up by accident. If there weren't springs around to make it obvious, it probably just something that they discovered by accident when they were digging out a root cellar or the foundation for a big building or something like that. They probably struck water and thought, well, pun intended there, this is going to be useful. We need this stuff. We need this for our crops. We need this for our livestock. We need it for ourselves so that we don't just die. Water's incredibly useful and necessary to everything. And so, they would dig wells. But you can only dig so many in a small area, and I'm going to get back to that in a bit. So, bear with me here. So, anyway, that's a dug well. And that was the well for up until they came up with the steam engine, and then later the gasoline and diesel powered engines, which made it so that you didn't have to hand dig it anymore. And along the same time, they also came up with better metalworking and the ability to not really mass produce, but produce on a much larger scale, better quality drill bits and machinery and such. And so you now had the ability to drill a well. And a drilled well is still the most common kind of well in the developed world now. It's what I have here. And, it reduces the manpower necessary to make the well happen. And it has a sort of side benefit because this is only like an 8-inch diameter well. You're not going to put a bucket down that. You have to do it with a pump. First it would have been a hand pump. Having this drilled well with a hand pump on it was a significant advantage to a dug well. See, a dug well, it was only sealed by a lid that you put over it. And you might forget to put on the lid. It might get blown off. It might rot away. It might get knocked off by a large animal. It might get taken off by a smaller animal that's clever with little human-like hands, like, say, a raccoon. And that's bad. So maybe if you get queasy from talk of gross things, you might want to click on the little speaker icon to drop the sound down, or scroll ahead to when I do this. When I do this again, the gross stuff will be over. So for those that remained, what could happen with a dug well with its lid would be that an animal might fall into that well and die down there. They might crash into the wall on the way down or just drown at the bottom. And yuck, that's gross. You've got a dead animal in your water supply. That's not good at all. So hopefully you figured it out quickly and got it out of there. But even then, it was still in there, and there's a lot of health risks go on with that. So yeah, getting rid of that and getting a closed system made it a lot better. Anyway, that's that. Now that for anybody who decided to turn the sound off, welcome back. I have no judgment over you. What I talked about makes me feel a little uneasy myself. So yeah, it's pretty bad. But well, the advantage of a hand pumped well was that it was much less health issues involved with having that than having an open pit dug well. So, it was good for that. Now, that was the main way of dealing with a well then for the next 100 years or so, until electricity became more widespread. Like here in the U.S., it was more like the 1920s and 30s that they were really spreading out the electrical grid. And with that, you got a lot more electrical appliances, including electric well pumps. This is what I have here. The electric well pump in the drilled well is the standard for wells here in the industrial world now. Any place that's developed, that's what you generally have. It didn't happen immediately everywhere. My mom grew up near here, and right down the road from her, there was still somebody with a hand pump for their well in their kitchen sink. So, they didn't adapt immediately to it. That would have been like the late 50s to early 60s that you would have noticed this. So, yeah, some people still just didn't adapt. They didn't have the money, they didn't see the need, whatever. But having an electric pump is so much more convenient. It basically makes your water behave a lot like municipal water does in a city. It's just there on demand. You hit the faucet, it's there. You flush a toilet, it's there. It fills it right back up. Does everything it needs to do. Now there's multiple parts to that though. It doesn't just come from the well pump itself. First it has to go underneath the house over there. And I could show you this, but it's pretty dark under there. There's lights, but it's not suitable enough for filming. And I don't feel like dragging a bunch of shop lights under there for a 2-minute section about this next part, which is the pressure tank. Pressure tank is a lot like a propane tank, the larger round kind that you get for like your barbecue. It's cylindrical, rounded, domed top on it, like a kind of a giant capsule. Metal, has a pressure gauge on the top and a place to put in a air hose to fill it up to begin with. And inside there's a rubber bladder. And that rubber bladder is what pushes on the water and creates the pressure for your water throughout your house. Now I wouldn't say that it's as good as what the water pressure was like when I lived in the city. It's lower, but it's enough. It works just fine for my washing machine, my dishwasher, cleaning things in the sink, taking a shower, flushing the toilet, those kinds of things all work. I wouldn't try to do too many of them at once, but I wouldn't try to do too many of them at once in the city either. Your pressure would drop. But it's somewhat lower. But it's within reason. And, that's what we have. Now, why is it different from city to rural areas? Why don't people in the cities just sink a bunch of wells? Cities were generally built along rivers and other sources of fresh water. All your major cities are almost all near a river for a very long time. And it was basically the limiting factor on how big a city could get in population. You had to be enough close to them to the river to be able to get the water. Now some people probably sunk some wells out in the outskirts for a while, but it's not scalable. And it's really not scalable when you start to get cities of like 1 million people, which doesn't really happen, except for one major exception, in the West until around 1800 or so, when they start putting in municipal water. That one major exception is ancient Rome. During the Republic and into the Empire period, they built what was basically the ancient equivalent of a municipal water system, the aqueduct system. They even had pipes to move it into people's houses. It was just there. They had a steady water supply. And as such, when Augustus ruled in the beginning of the actual empire, estimates range from 500,000 on the low end to 2 million on the high end. Those two extremes are probably inaccurate. The more reasonable ones that people toss around tend to be between 800,000 and 1.2 million, which is probably about right. Call it a million. City of a million people in, right around 0 AD. So that's amazing because you don't see it again in the West until the 1800s. London hits a million at about 1800. Paris at nearly 1850. And, more and more cities as time goes by. When they start pumping in water to supply all the people who need it. Now, in a city of a million people, so you have a 20-mile area, 20 square mile area that is your city, and you have a million people in it. And, 80% of them don't live near enough to the river or wherever else you're getting your natural water from to have water. They can't all sink wells. It's not scalable. You'd have hundreds of thousands of wells. You would drain any aquifer dry very quickly by doing that, no matter how rainy the area was. Even in places in the Pacific Northwest like Seattle, where they might get upwards of 100 inches of rain a year, it still wouldn't be enough to replenish it with hundreds of thousands of wells draining off the water. It just wouldn't happen. So that's one of the reasons that they do municipal water in the city. There's others, water quality. They could treat it. They could filter out, they could kill any microbes. They could filter out bad stuff. They could do it all on an industrial scale. And, I have to do that on my own here. I have to do things like soften it and filter it. And that has to be contained in my house because, the city's not doing it. It's coming out of the ground. And it's got all the, it's got plenty of soft minerals like calcium and such in it. That'll gum up your fixtures, shower heads, your faucets and such. And it's got, there's going to be some microbes down there too. Water attracts life, and microbes are life. And, even down below ground, there would be some. So, you want to kill those off too. There's heavy metals and rare earth metals and things like that you don't want in your body. So, you want to get rid of those. And a city can do that on an industrial scale, whereas I have to do it individually in my own home, and I will get to that in the next part of this. But yeah, so that was another reason, water quality. Didn't always stay that way because circumstances change. A city can lose a major industry, can lose a lot of population, so its tax base can shrink, so they can't afford to maintain their municipal water system the way they wanted to. But that was the original intention. Notable example of that would be about 40 miles that way in Flint, Michigan. We all know that, we all heard about the massive problem that they had when their water system failed several years ago. People were getting sick, lead poisoning, Legionnaire's disease, terrible, terrible things, because the system was just no longer maintained. They didn't have the money to do it. It wasn't the priority for the little money that they had. And more recently, this very summer, and into, it's probably still going on right now, they're working on fixing it, I'd imagine, but Jackson, Mississippi, it's the state capital down there, and their water system failed spectacularly this year. It had been on its way out for quite some time, but it was really, really bad this year, just about a month or so ago. It was making big national news. And those aren't the only ones. There are many, many municipal water systems around this country that are degrading and failing a lot more than you would think. Another major reason that they would make a municipal water system, one you might not think of, would be water pressure. Not so much for homes and businesses, though some businesses do need it. You need a certain amount of water pressure consistently to run a car wash, and some industries need it too. But likely more so the pressure for fire hydrants for a professional fire department. We don't have that here because we don't have the water mains. We can't have fire hydrants, and they're not going to be able to tap into your well here because likely the electrical supply to it, if your house is on fire, is going to be cut, and so they're not going to be able to use it. So we have a volunteer fire department, and we have a building, and they have trucks, pumper trucks. They come out, they have water in them already, and hopefully it's enough to put out your house if it's on fire, because if it's not, I guess you're kind of out of luck. They don't get called out all that much for fires around here. They seem to get called out more for car accidents. It's not to say that house fires are completely absent around here. They do happen. My maternal grandmother, mom's mom, she lived through 2 of them. First one as a kid, where she lived right by the Saginaw Bay, in a place called Bay City. Clever name for a city right by the bay, I'd imagine. Anyway, she did that one when she was a kid. And then, about 5 miles or so from here, where my mom grew up, she lived through it with her children, including my mom. My mom was always paranoid about fires after that, because, and I imagine you would be if you lived through one as a child. So, yeah, she lived through 2 in her life. Mom lived through 1. So they do happen. I mean, houses are still made of wood and other flammable materials, and there's still electrical things that can go wrong, cause a spark to ignite it all. It happens. Not too many grass fires or brush fires or anything like that, but I have seen 2 here from this very property. Once while we were building the place, and once a few years after, a couple of years after. It wasn't very long. It's an interesting story. It's for another time. It's tied into something else that we do out here in rural America that you don't usually do in cities. And I'll get to it. Probably a few weeks. Won't be too long. But yeah, that was another reason. And one more is about the disposal, but I will talk about the disposal of all the excess, of all the water that you've used. What happens to it afterward? Because, it's filled with a lot of gross stuff, so, you got to do something about it. But that is a topic for a whole other video. The next one in this series will be that. So, stay tuned for that next week. But anyway, let's take it inside. It's getting a little cool out here. Plus, the next part of the system is all inside the house, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. So, come along with me. You'll see the inside of the house for the first time. So here we are inside the house. This is our water filtration and softening center. It's here in our laundry room. Some people call it a mud room, just because you come in here with your muddy feet in the wet weather and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a place to take off, knock them off and clean them off and take them off. All your shoes that have all the bad, muddy junk on them, so you don't truck it through the house. But yeah, this is it. Now, over here, we have pumps. They pump the water up from underneath the pressure tank. It all comes up in through here. It pumps it through into the filtration system, which is back here. These filters here and down there. There's 3 down there, 1 big one up here. And into the softener tank, which is filled with salt. Let's take a look at that. You can see the salt down in there. And it's getting pretty low. Gonna have to refill it pretty soon. It's always a fun job. A lot of heavy bags of salt to haul around. But you can see I've covered up all the logos for the company name. I'm not getting paid by them to advertise, so they're not getting a free ad. If somehow this ever becomes magically popular and they see it, they'll know their system. They can talk to me. I'm a satisfied customer, so I would happily do ads for them if they wanted me to. If I somehow became like a huge YouTube sensation. But yeah, that's what it is. It goes through here. The filters. Well, let's go to softener first. Softener pushes it through a salt tank. And, that's important because, it's salt in your water. It doesn't make it as briny as like ocean water or anything like that, but there is a taste to it. You could taste that it's been through salt. So, you don't usually use that for drinking. It's mainly designed to pull out the soft minerals, your iron too. There's specifically something called red salt that you put in there that is supposed to eliminate iron to make it so that you don't get rusty stains all over everything. It doesn't get all of it, but it gets a lot of it. It's reasonable. No softening system gets rid of all of the iron. It just doesn't happen. You're going to get some rusty stuff. You got to clean it up. It's no big deal. But yeah, and there's lime, there's calcium. Those are the things that will gum up your shower head and your faucets, all your fixtures. So you want that, want as much of that out of there as you can get out. So that's what a softener does. It removes the minerals that make it hard water. And then back in the back, there's the filtration. These are microfiber filters. They work as a reverse osmosis system. Osmosis is, if you remember from biology, it's a movement of things from a greater concentration to a lower concentration across a semi-permeable membrane. This works in the opposite. It uses the membrane to strain things out, to take things out of where they're in high concentration and just remove them. Puts them into these microfiber filters and traps them. And that way it gets rid of microbes, it gets rid of heavy metals, rare earth metals, things like that. Things that you definitely don't want in your body. And it produces very, very, very clean water. It is probably cleaner than any bottled water you're ever going to drink. It's really good. It tastes good. It only goes to one tap in the kitchen that is used strictly for drinking water or water for cooking. And that's what we use it for. And that is actually where we will go next. So here we are at the kitchen sink. A lot of places will tell you that they'll give you everything but the kitchen sink. I'm going to give you the kitchen sink here. So here it is. Now we have two taps here, you can see. This big one here, that is just plain softened water. It's not great for drinking. I mean, you can drink it, it's not going to be as clean, and it's going to have a little hint of salty flavor to it. But, it's great for washing things. It's great for anything else that you need to do with water in your sink. Good pressure. Works pretty well. Now, the other tap is for the reverse osmosis filtered water. And that is for your drinking water and for any cooking that you're going to do that needs water. So, if you're ever at my place and you, for whatever reason, seems unlikely, but if you are, don't get water from this tap. Also, probably don't get it from the taps in the bathroom sinks, because it's going to just be softened water. It's not the best for drinking. You can drink it, but I wouldn't recommend it. The flavor's not great. It's not as clean as it could be. You would want to go over here. Turn this one on. You can see that it takes a while for it to get going, and the pressure is significantly lower. It's just like when you have one of those filter things attached to your normal tap. It takes it a long time, or one of those filter pitchers or something like that. It just, you put the water in, and it takes it much longer to go through the filter and get out. It takes away a lot of that pressure. So, it's just the process of being pressurized or being filtered that takes away the pressure. But yeah, nice clean glass of water. It's good stuff. It's at least as good, if not better, than any bottled water you're going to drink. It's nice and clean. We'll give it a go. Cheers. just like water. It always seems to have an almost sweet thing to it, like it hits the sweet sensors on my tongue. I don't know if that's just me or whatever, but you know, it's just pure water. It's been tested. It's about as clean as you're ever gonna drink anywhere in your life. But yeah, that's the basic system. That's where your water is. Now, there's still one more topic to deal with water. You know, I dealt with rain, the ultimate source of water, and I dealt with how the water gets into your house. But I haven't dealt with one last bit of it. What happens when it leaves your house, when you're done with it? And that is significantly different between a city and a rural place like this too. And that will be a topic for the next video. So, that's it for the topic for this week. I appreciate all of you who stuck around and watched it. Thank you so much. And there's all that stuff that you can still do at the bottom here. I noticed after I put up the last one, between when I filmed it and when I put it up, the YouTube changed it so that the subscribe that used to be over here is now over here. So, but you know, whatever. You can do that, you can like, you can comment, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to do any of it. It's all your choice. I can't force you. Yeah, but you know, thanks for watching, and I hope you all have the best possible day that you can have, and I will see you soon. Take care.